I used to think the dark gets easier if you're inside a lit box. It doesn't. It makes you a lighthouse for whatever is out there to find. That's what the graveyard shift at the highway gas station felt like, a glass cube of Hums and stale coffee floating in a long black nothing, with me as the tiny moving dot behind the counter. I took the job after the warehouse let me go. Rent didn't care about layoffs, so Route 19 it was. A quick hiring form, a safety video with grainy burns on the film, a polo that smelled like someone else's deodorant, and a register that blinked at me like it knew things. Nights were a choir of machines. The cooler's motor, the icebox's wheeze, the soda fountain's soft burp, the AC's cough every 20 minutes. The pumps clicked when someone lifted a handle. The motion chime blinked when anyone came in. Small sounds become companions when the world's asleep. You get types at that hour, truckers with careful hands who say sir and count change like it matters, nurses in scrubs with soft smiles that apologize to the night, boys with club glitter and borrowed jackets asking for gum, and those little bottles behind the counter. The talkers who explain radio frequencies and street light angles. I liked those. They made me feel like a bench in a town square instead of a specimen in a lit tank. By the third week, I could run the place by muscle memory. 1 o'clock coffee, 1:30 counters, 2 o'clock bathroom, 2:30 loop the lot with the grabber and little cart, 3 o'clock cigarettes and scratch-offs, 4 for the cash drawer and breakfast sandwiches. The security monitor lived in my peripheral vision like a guilty thought. I never propped the door with the yellow wedge, no matter how the air felt. The first odd thing barely registered. An old sedan, gray or silver depending on the canopy glare, pulled up to pump 2 with the engine on and the lights off. It sat there, 5 minutes, 10. The pump beeped its polite reminder, nobody got out. I stepped to the door to ask if the card reader was acting up, and the car rolled backward, spit a little gravel, then slid onto the highway without headlights. The quiet that followed had weight. Then the chime dinged, and a kid with a hoodie and 2 friends in the car tossed quarters on the counter for a fountain drink. Life tugged me back. The next night, the payphone rang. It sat under a faded blue hood beside the air pump, scratched metal face, a receiver that had probably touched every cheek in the county since the dial-up days. I had never seen it used. The ring cut through the indoor hum with a weird clean edge. I went out, picked up the receiver, felt the cold metal kiss my ear. Static at first. Not silence. Some faraway room tone and a seabed hiss, like sound that had forgotten what it was supposed to be. Then a voice, thin and close, like it had traveled too far and lost weight on the road. Don't go back inside. I turned in a circle with the cord wrapped once around my wrist. No one by the pumps, no pranksters crouched behind the ice freezer, no headlights either way. Fields sat beyond the ditch, a flat black that swallowed your eyes. "Who is this?" I asked, but the line breathed once and died. When I stepped inside, the air felt stale, as if the AC had taken a break while I was gone. I locked the door without thinking. Weird stuff at 3 a.m. gets filed under ignore if you want to stay sane. I told no one. I told myself it was a crossed line, a maintenance test, some engine sound that mimicked a ring. The story I told myself lasted exactly 1 more night. Third night, same sedan, same pump, same idling. I stayed behind the counter. 10 minutes, 15. The driver's door opened. A tall shape unfolded like someone remembering how joints work. Under the canopy, his face was a moving blank. Features seemed there and not there. He didn't touch the pump, didn't check his trunk. He stood and stared at the glass, arms at his sides, still in a way that made me want to cough just to make sound. "You okay out there?" I asked, though he couldn't hear me. His head tilted, a small tick. Then he got in, and the sedan drifted away without the visible steps a car should make. No brake light, no reverse pop. Just gone. When I mentioned it to my manager in the morning, she didn't roll her eyes or pat me on the head. "Call the sheriff next time," she said, like a person who had worked enough nights to know sometimes there's no next time. You get to choose. The fourth night was an empty kind of quiet. No sedan, no customers between 2 and 4, just the slow river sound of distant traffic. At 3:33, the payphone rang again. I told myself not to answer. It kept ringing, patient and mean. The receiver felt tacky, like old sugar on glass. "Hello," I said to a bad idea. "You let him in," the same thin voice said, a whisper sharpened by wire. "You already did," I looked back at the door because the voice told me to. In the glass, I saw the booth, the road, myself, and, just for a ripple, more pumps than we had. I walked fast to the door with that race feeling at my back. The lock was set, but the door opened under my hand like it had been waiting. Inside, the fluorescent above the cooler pulsed like a slow heartbeat. The storage room in back was open. I keep it closed. It smelled like wet cardboard and gasoline and the past. I nudged it shut by the edge like it might bite. Day off, I made the mistake of looking the place up. Gas price threads, a 5-year-old photo of the canopy after new decals, a Yelp half-star for coffee that tastes like paper, which was fair, buried deeper, a ghost group post titled Route 19 Night Shift. Caption, "Things aren't supposed to run at that station anymore." The comments were cousins and clowns. I shut the laptop. The internet is a mirror that returns whatever you carry to it. Night 5, routine resumed, until it didn't. The sedan again, pump 2, engine off. I picked up the store phone to call the sheriff. The lights dimmed, not off, but like someone took the room down on a dial. The monitor made snow, cleared. In the pump 2 frame, something low slid across the edge of the canopy's light, a poured shadow deciding to be somewhere else. By the time I lifted my head, the man was at the door, closer than I'd thought possible. His jacket seam had texture now. His face refused to stay fixed, eyes too wide, then too narrow, mouth a line and then less than that. He put his hands flat on the glass like a kid at an aquarium. His breath fogged a perfect circle that took too long to fade. He drew his finger down the glass and a dry line remained. The light stepped out and stepped back. When they returned, the door stood ajar even though the bolt was turned, a shallow river of air dragging across the mat. He was gone. The back hall camera showed the storage door open again like a mouth. I took 3 steps toward it and stopped in the candy aisle as the room shifted in that subtle way you feel when someone reads over your shoulder. In the ice chest lid's reflection, I saw the front door in a dark shape standing just inside it, head lifted like it had found a ceiling worth looking at. I turned. The doorway was empty, but 2 wet, bare footprints glistened on the mat, evaporating under the AC's thin breath. The payphone rang with the receiver already off the hook, swinging in a lazy arc. The bell sound didn't match the sway. It came from somewhere else. I went outside anyway because refusing is a muscle I hadn't trained. "You're late," the voice said when I lifted the receiver, and for a second it sounded like me. A slow car passed, headlights throwing a double sweep across the canopy and then another canopy a heartbeat behind it, as if 2 stations overlapped like cards. I hung up wrong. The receiver slumped cockeyed. At 4, I made coffee. At 5, a guy in a reflective vest made his ghost joke and laughed at himself. At 6, I counted the till and walked by the storage door without looking at it because that felt like defiance. Some defiance is small and still counts. The next night I clocked in early, rinsed cups just to move my hands, turned off the radio when it started dribbling weather wrapped around last week's ball scores, and let it murmur back to life on its own. At 2:58, 3 bikes glided past with laughter that didn't make it through the glass. At 3:05, the sedan eased to pump 2, engine off. I stayed inside. He stayed in the car. We gave each other that. At 3:11, the storage door swung open on the monitor. I didn't need to turn around to feel the cool thread of air creeping across the tiles. I walked to the back because sometimes your choices arrive made. The storage room smelled like damp. Like everyone who had ever mopped had left a molecule behind. A small gray door sat ankle-high on the far wall, suitcase-sized, dented handle, a torn label that might have said "Access." I had never seen it before, and also knew exactly where it was. The metal was old and new at once. The latch resisted like sleep. When it gave, the door moved 2 inches and pressed against something soft and cold. The gap exhaled earth, oil, and time. Something shifted in there the way a large animal turns in a den. My name seemed to form without sound. I closed it gently and said no to prove to myself I still could. Back up front, the entrance mat held an oval shine like a small pond seen from above. As I watched, it dried into a ring. The sedan door was open. The man stood in that outside about to be inside spot, choosing left or right for his first step. "Don't come in," I said. He tilted his head. He set his hand on the glass. I placed mine where his would meet it, and my palm went cold like his was inside already. He mouthed a single word, "Please," with a weight that felt older than shame or manners. The ache that stabbed through the base of my thumb was small and precise, like a freezing pin. He leaned to the seam and whispered, almost sorry, "You should have stayed outside." The dimming happened again, steady as a tide. When the brightness returned, he was standing at the coffee station, hands in his jacket pockets, looking down as if trying to remember the ritual. He touched the carafe handle like heat was an idea. Then he came to the counter, took out a wallet like a man who'd learned to stand in lines, and set a 20 down. "For what?" I asked. The register wanted a category. "To leave," he said. "I don't know how to sell that," I told him. The system didn't have a key labeled exit. The radio clicked, and the AM weather voice announced calmly, "Closed until further notice." The open sign flickered and died. The payphone rang once, a sound like a dropped plate, then stopped. He tucked the 20 away and slid me a folded receipt, soft and warm from the wallet. Our station's header, today's date, 3:12 a.m., pump 2, a total, a signature line with my name pre-printed under it. The register read 3:12. "I didn't run this," I said, but it came out like I was asking him to correct me. I turned the slip over, in my jittery handwriting. "He'll ask, and you'll say yes, and that's the only way through." "I don't remember writing this," I said. "You will," he said. His face settled for a heartbeat, features aligning into something a grocery line stranger might wear. He nodded toward the back. I didn't ask what he meant. My feet answered for me. Fear protested from the ribs out. Habit carried me along the aisle. At the gray door I pulled the latch. Cold marched up my arms and set a fine ache in my gums. This time the air from the gap smelled like hot asphalt after rain, new rubber, the clean antiseptic of a room that forgets people. In the thickness beyond, I heard traffic that might have been yesterday and my own voice arguing with itself on a payphone. "Okay," I said, because the man had a receipt and I had handwriting and it all felt like a trap I'd baited for myself. He didn't thank me. He put his hand on the frame and the other on my shoulder like someone climbing through a fence who trusts you not to move. He swung his legs in, paused, looked at me with the face humans wear when they are briefly, mercifully, only human. "You should have stayed outside," he said again, a kindness this time, not warning, not accusation, just advice to a version of me he'd met somewhere I hadn't been yet. Then he went where the door led. I closed it. The latch coughed. Warmth returned the way tide does when your feet stop feeling stones. Up front, the door was shut and bolted, the phone rested on its hook, and pump 2 had nothing waiting under the neon numbers. I brewed coffee and spilled grounds, watched a sparrow hop around the pumps like a disappointed inspector, sold a truck or 2 sausage biscuits, and waited for the world to announce itself changed. It didn't. The receipt in my pocket did. Under my original note, a second line had appeared, or I had refused to see it before. He said it to be kind. This time, stay outside. I worked 2 more quiet nights. No sedan, no phone calls. The storage door stayed where I left it. Then, on a shift change, I arrived to find a sheet of paper taped to the door, closed until further notice. The bolt was set from the outside. The payphone sat like a chapel no one went into anymore. Through the glass, the store looked like rooms look after a party everyone left without saying goodbye. I circled the building. Behind it, water collected in the sprinkler ditch and reflected a sky with too many stars. The air pump wore a strip of tape with a hand-scrawled NO. The payphone hood had a fresh white streak. I wiped it with my sleeve because putting tiny things back where they belong is a habit that keeps your hands from shaking. When I returned to the front, a sedan sat at pump 2, door open, nobody inside. The night felt syrupy. The payphone rang once. I stayed where I was, hands in my pockets so they wouldn't betray me. The single ring hung in the air, like a coin tossed, and never landing. Dawn stretched thin, then fat. A county cruiser slowed. The deputy checked my face, saw something he didn't want to ask, and kept going. When the sky had color, there was no sedan. The mat was dry. The sign was still a fact. I changed jobs. The new one was the opposite of glass, concrete, steel, forklifts like angry insects, a loading bay intake desk in a 24-hour warehouse. Noise can feel like safety, but quiet finds you inside noise, too. On a cold night, the corrugated bay wall sweats. If you stand too close, the metal chills through your jacket and reflects a little, so you see distortions. Once, in the blur, I caught a rectangle of glass, rows of candy, a blue hood, pump 2 flickering at the edges of the metal like a TV station half-tuned. I didn't turn. The chain on the roll-up door rattled a test. I walked to my desk and wrote on a sticky note with block letters to make the words behave. Stay outside. Answer kindly. I stuck it on the monitor. A coworker asked what it meant. Break room rules, I said. She nodded like truth had knocked somewhere nearby. On nights off, I sometimes wake at 3:12 with the flavor of payphone metal on my tongue. Sometimes my kitchen phone rings once and leaves nothing behind, and I stand very still until the minute passes and the air thins. Sometimes I dream I'm counting change, and each quarter is a mirror, and each mirror shows the canopy light filling with moths. Once I drove out to the closed station and stood under the booth hood without touching the receiver, the blue plastic gleaming like a lid on a jar. I didn't need to talk to know the answer I'd get. I stood outside until a bird decided morning had started, then went home quietly so the cup wouldn't sound like a bell when I set it down. If you ask what happened, I can only stack the pieces. A man was lost, he asked. I said yes. That time, I went in. Now I don't. If a phone rings under a little blue hood at 3:33 and the voice that traveled a long way says, "Don't go back inside," hear the kindness and not the command. If a sedan parks at pump 2 with the engine off and your breath fogs where it shouldn't, remember there are doors that open when you look at them and doors that close when you don't. Sometimes the station is open with a bored kid behind the counter. Sometimes it's dark with a taped sign. Sometimes it's 4 bolts in gravel like a missing tooth. Once it was 2 stations at once, until I blinked. I've stopped asking which one is real. The world rarely explains itself, and when it does, it uses a voice you recognize after you've heard it once. I still work nights, different hums, different screens. Sometimes the air at the back of the room tastes colder than it should, and my hand pauses on a storage room knob and says, "I see you," and that is all. Sometimes a room I'm not in sells a thing I can't ring up. Sometimes my name is printed under a signature I haven't signed yet. Sometimes I picture a receipt turning over to show my own handwriting, telling me what I already did. The light inside the glass is not for us. It's for whoever is trying to find a shore. So I stand outside when I can. When I can't, I try to say yes and be kind. And I don't put my hand on the glass unless I mean it. I took the night shift at the downtown parking garage because it sounded like easy money. Sit in a booth, wave cars through, help with finicky payment machines, and answer the intercom if someone got stuck. The job ad promised a quiet overnight environment, which I took to mean I could sit unbothered with a thermos of coffee, a paperback, and maybe finally kick my nail-biting habit. The booth was a concrete box with a half-working heater and a stool with one leg patched with duct tape. Outside, the city glowed like a tunnel of light. Inside, it was all gray concrete, security cameras, and the hum of tires rolling over painted lines. The garage sprawls beneath 3 office towers and a small hotel, 7 levels total, including 2 basement floors. At night, only street level through 5 stay open. B1 and B2 locked down at 10 p.m. for monthly parkers, the kind who leave their shoes under desks and their cars collecting dust. My booth faces the exit lane, where a spiral ramp curves like the inside of a seashell, leading to the payment plaza where people argue with machines after midnight. My job is straightforward. Lift the gate if the ticket reader fails, respond to intercom calls, and log anything unusual in a spiral notebook. You learn the garage's sounds fast. Tires hiss on painted arrows, whisper roughly on bare concrete, echoing like a gravelly sigh. The ventilation fans kick on and off, grumbling like old men clearing their throats. The elevator dings. Doors slide open, then close. A car alarm on level 5 echoes down the ramp, a stuttering sound that's more menace than laughter. The whole place breathes with mechanical lungs, alive in its own way. Rick, the day shift guy, handed me the spiral notebook on my first day. He didn't look like a Rick. His face was too generic, like it belonged to every name but that one. "Log everything," he said. "If it's weird, write it. If it's nothing, write it anyway. Night shows you patterns. If you don't look for them, they'll still find you." His words carried the weight of advice and warning, his eyes glassy from too many hours staring at monitors. The first night felt almost cozy. The movie theater across the street emptied out by midnight, spilling couples and groups into the garage. Hotel guests wheeled quiet suitcases. Bar patrons bickered about lost tickets or whether a white SUV looked gray under sodium lights. It doesn't. At 1:30, a food delivery guy took the exit ramp too fast, apologizing like I was the pavement. At 2 o'clock, a nurse in navy scrubs parked near the east stairwell, head down, keys clutched between her fingers. At 3 o'clock, an office worker in a tie but no jacket hunted for a blue Camry, cursed at a black Accord, and left with a sheepish laugh after I pointed him to the right car. By 3:30, the city quieted and the cameras showed empty concrete rectangles. Then, at 3:17, the intercom lit up. Level 4, east stairwell. The small orange light blinked on my panel. I pressed the talk button. Garage help desk. Go ahead. Silence. I checked the monitor. The camera showed an empty landing, the exit sign above the door blinking slowly like a tired eyelid. I released the button. The light blinked again. I pressed talk, hearing only a low hum, like holding a seashell to your ear, a whisper that wasn't words. I closed the line. A minute later, the light blinked again. I logged it. 0317, L4 East Help Button X2, no caller. The second night, the elevator arrived at the lobby at 3:18, doors opening to an empty car. The air inside felt colder than the lobby, a chill I could sense from my stool. The doors stayed open for 30 seconds, then closed. 10 seconds later, they opened again. This repeated 5 times in 3 minutes, like someone kept remembering something to say, then forgetting. I radioed building security. The overnight guard muttered, "Bad weight sensor," in a tone that sounded rehearsed. I wanted to believe him, but I wrote it down anyway. By the end of the week, the intercom had a schedule between 3:16 and 3:19, always the east stairwell on level 3 or 4. I'd answer, hear nothing, see no one on the cameras. Sometimes there was a faint scritch, like a fingernail dragged across the grill, or a soft breath I couldn't be sure wasn't mine. The elevator joined in, arriving empty, its air colder than it should be. I started logging the weather. Rain, no rain, warm spells, wind. On windy nights, the fans worked harder, and the intercom calls lingered. A pattern was forming, like a shape under a sheet I could sense, but not name. On Thursday, the movie theater cleared early, leaving the garage quiet by midnight. I was tearing validation slips when a white van, contractor style, no logos, small high windows, rolled slowly down the spiral ramp and parked at the far end of level 1, just where my camera's view faded. The engine shut off. The driver didn't get out. People sometimes linger, checking phones, crying, staring into the dark. So I waited. 2 minutes. 5. 10. No movement. The camera caught only a sliver of the van's rear, its taillight a smooth red curve. I put on my windbreaker, labeled security in bold letters, grabbed my radio and wand scanner, and stepped out. My footsteps echoed, lonely in the quiet. "Garage attendant?" I called softly, like coaxing someone to show a ticket. "Everything okay?" No response. The van's windows were dark, not illegally tinted but deep enough to obscure details. I saw shapes, a steering wheel, a headrest, something hanging from the rearview mirror, maybe a rosary or an air freshener. I circled to the back, no bumper stickers. The license plate, 3NB614, had one screw shinier than the others. I memorized it, repeating it aloud as I returned to the booth, Rick's voice in my head. "Right plates when your neck tingles." I checked the system for the plate. "No record," it said. Sometimes readers miss plates or someone borrows a ticket, but the absence felt wrong. I logged it. At 3:16, the intercom lit. Level 4. "East stairwell." I answered. Silence. The camera showed an empty landing, the exit sign blinking. The elevator opened, its air cold, smelling faintly of rain despite 3 dry days outside. I wrote it down. The van stayed until 5:45, then vanished without sound or brake lights, leaving clean tire marks and a darker patch on the concrete, like a wet mat had been lifted. I told Rick in the morning. He rubbed his forehead, wrote 3NB614 in the spiral, and underlined it with slow care, like labeling something dangerous. Write it down, he said, voice flat. The next night, the garage was loud with hockey fans, their jerseys flooding the ramps, horns echoing. The intercom still called at 317, now from level 3. Then both level 3 and 4 lit up simultaneously. The cameras showed identical empty landings. I pressed talk on one. The other went dark, then relit. It felt like someone was switching lines, silent but amused. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. Level 2 had a candy wrapper, folded like a tiny tent. Level 3's door was propped open with a matchbox-sized wood scrap. I kicked it free, letting the door shut. On level 4, a cold draft brushed my face, then vanished. No one was there. Back in the lobby, the elevator waited, open and empty, colder by 5 degrees. I felt it like invisible fog. Saturday, the van returned at 3:12, parking in the same corner. It took a ticket at the pay station, but the machine beeped a denial for a second attempt. The driver's arm, pale, bare, reached out, then withdrew. The van backed up smoothly, parking again. I stayed in the booth. At 3:16, the intercom lit. Level 4, east stairwell. I didn't answer. The elevator opened, empty. At 4:23, the van's brake lights glowed. Its sliding door opened, releasing a cold, wet smell like an open freezer. 3 taps came from the level 1 east stairwell door, 30 feet away. I approached, heart loud in my ears. "Need help?" I asked. 3 more taps, too close for the door. I backed away. The van's door shut, engine started, and it rolled to the gate. I scanned its ticket. Invalid time sequence, entry time 3:12. I lifted the gate, and it left without pause. The B1 gate, locked at 10, flashed green briefly. The camera there, often glitchy, showed a white shape for 1 frame, then static. I logged taps by L1 east door, but didn't tell Rick about them. It felt like snitching on myself. He saw the plate number, though. "We had a white van before," he said. "Years ago. Another night guy wrote about it. Same deal. Parking, leaving by the wrong gate. Ticket always stamped 3:12. He flipped through the spiral, as if old logs might appear. "We purge those," he said, voice heavy. The next 2 shifts were quiet, just the usual. Empty elevator, stairwell calls. Monday, the garage felt hollow, like the inside of a shell. The van arrived at 3:12, parked, and sat for 40 minutes. The cold smell returned stronger, making my teeth ache. The intercom lit. Level 4, then level 3, then both. I didn't answer. The elevator opened, and this time someone was inside. A shape, still, centered, with shoulders and a head but no clear features. Static cut the camera's top quarter. The bottom was dark, like spilled shadow. The doors lingered, then closed. The panel flashed B1, impossible after 10. The car stopped, didn't open, then vanished from the panel. I walked to the van, stopping where the camera could see me. The driver's window was down 3 inches, a first. "Garage attendant," I said. "You okay?" No answer. Through the gap, I saw a steering wheel, a crumpled paper bag, a rosary with black beads swinging faintly. The sliding door opened halfway, smooth and motorized. Inside, a plastic crate lay crosswise, a loose strap across it. The cold smell poured out, like damp cloth and freezer burn. Something thumped inside the crate, soft, twice. I froze, then said, "Please don't." To the van, the crate, the air. The rosary swung harder, as if brushed by unseen breath. The intercom lit. "Exit plaza. Help." The button outside my booth. Through the glass, I saw my stool, coffee, notebook. The booth was locked, but the button glowed, and a faint breath came through the speaker, just off from mine. I backed away, saying, "I'm calling security," but didn't. At 4:09, the crate thumped softer, like something settling. The door closed gently. The van left, ticket invalid, entry time 3:12. I lifted the gate, glimpsing a partial face, forehead, cheek, no eye, like a frame caught and lost. The rosary swung once more. Rick later confirmed a death years ago, a delivery driver in a white van, heart attack found at 6 a.m., ticket stamped 3:12. The van returned 3 more nights, always 3:12, always the same spot. The crate thumped once, each night, fainter each time. The intercom and elevator followed their pattern. On the 4th night, the van sat silently, no calls, no elevator. It left at 4:33. A sign appeared, Exit Plaza, closed 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. for maintenance. At 5 a.m., Rick watched me peel it off. Can't close for ghosts every night, he said. The van hasn't returned. The intercom calls occasionally, at 3:16. I answer, garage desk. The elevator sometimes opens, air normal or cold. I log rain smells in a dry garage, coffee tasting like paper. I still work the booth, waving through nurses, office workers, bar crowds. At 3:12, I glance at the ramp. Usually it's empty, maybe a bus or delivery truck. I watch lingering vehicles but don't approach. If knocks come from the stairwell, I wait. If the elevator opens, I breathe deliberately, marking my presence. At home, I leave shoes by the door, keys in a dish, my grandmother's rosary by the oven. It sways when the heat kicks on, a mechanical breath. Some nights, 3 faint taps come from the closet. I don't open it. I stand, listen, and say, I'm here. I'm outside. No doors tonight. If it thumps back, we've said enough. I've worked a lot of late-night jobs, but nothing quite compares to working the night shift at a 24-hour diner. People think it's boring, just coffee refills and greasy food for truckers, but the truth is, the night shift has its own kind of rhythm. Between midnight and 5 a.m., the diner isn't just a restaurant, it's a way station, a kind of liminal space for people who don't quite fit into the daylight hours. You get the insomniacs, the drunks sobering up, the truckers with eyes red from the road, and the lonely folks who just want someone to pour their coffee and talk to them. I didn't mind it. In fact, I liked the routine, the hiss of the griddle, the smell of bacon and hash browns that never seemed to leave my uniform, the jukebox humming the same set of songs no one had updated in years. The neon sign out front buzzed against the dark highway, casting a red glow across the empty parking lot. I liked the fluorescent lights reflecting off the chrome napkin holders, the way the booths squeaked when people slid into them, the steady hum of the soda fountain filling the quiet. It felt safe, predictable. At least it used to. I first noticed him on a Tuesday night. The diner was dead, just me behind the counter, our cook Frank flipping bacon in the back, and the hum of the cooler echoing faintly against the tile. The bell above the door jingled, and in he came. He wasn't the kind of guy you'd expect to see at 2 in the morning. Most of our customers looked worn down by the road or half asleep, but this guy was different. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, tall, neatly dressed in a button-down shirt and a jacket that looked expensive but understated. His hair was combed back, not a strand out of place, and his posture was perfect, like he was posing for a photograph. Without hesitation, he walked straight to booth 7, the one by the window near the end of the row. He slid in, sat upright, and folded his hands on the table like he was waiting for an interview. When I walked over with a menu, he didn't even glance at it. "Coffee," he said, his voice calm and smooth. "Black." I poured it, set it down, and he gave me a polite nod. No smile, no small talk. He just sat there, sipping slowly, watching the window as if something outside was worth studying. That first night, he stayed until 4 in the morning, then left a crisp $20 bill under his cup and walked out without a word. Over the next 2 weeks, he came back every single night, always the same booth, always black coffee, always between 1:30 and 2 a.m. I started to anticipate it. Around 1:20, I'd check the pot to make sure the coffee was fresh. By 1:35, the door would open and the bell would jingle, like clockwork. At first, I thought he was just another regular, the way lonely men sometimes become fixtures in diners, but there was something strange about him. He never ordered food, he never looked tired, he never checked a phone or read a newspaper. He just sat there, perfectly still, sipping his coffee and staring out the window. One night, Frank wandered out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag, and leaned against the counter beside me. "Statue's back," he muttered under his breath, tilting his chin toward booth 7. I laughed, but it came out weak. Frank shook his head. "Guy gives me the creeps. Doesn't eat, doesn't talk, just sits. You watch yourself with him." I tried small talk once, just to break the weirdness, asked him if he was traveling through or local. He turned his head slowly, looked at me with the faintest smile and said, "Local enough." Then he went back to the window. That was all. It was a Friday, a little busier than usual when I noticed something else. A group of college kids came in loud and drunk, piling into a booth near the front. They were rowdy, laughing, slapping the table, one of them even trying to flirt with me while I poured their sodas. The man in booth 7 never moved, but I could feel his eyes on us. When I glanced back, I caught him watching, not the kids, but me. His gaze was steady, unblinking. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. I busied myself with the register, but every time I looked up, he was still watching me. Not angry, not leering, just watching. When the kids finally left, the diner quiet again, I walked past his booth to wipe down a nearby table. That's when he spoke for the first time that wasn't an order. "They shouldn't talk to you that way," he said softly. I froze. "Excuse me? Those boys. Disrespectful. You deserve better." I forced a smile. "Part of the job," I said, and walked away, but my hands were shaking. When he left that night, instead of a 20, he left a $100 bill under his cup. After that, he spoke more often, little comments. "You look tired tonight. You should sit down for a minute. You'd be safer if you didn't walk to your car alone." At first I thought maybe he was just a lonely man trying to be kind. But the way he said it, like he wasn't suggesting, but observing, like he already knew too much. Frank teased me about it, said I had a secret admirer, but the truth was, the more he came, the less I could laugh it off. One night, after his usual coffee, he slid a small piece of paper across the table. A phone number, neatly written. "If you ever need anything," he said, "anything at all, call this number." I pocketed it without a word. Later, when I was outside smoking a cigarette, I lit the paper on fire and watched it curl into ash in the parking lot. A week later, something shifted. It was 3 in the morning, the diner silent except for the faint buzz of the lights and the rattle of the old cooler. I was sketching in my notepad behind the counter when the bell over the door jingled. Relief washed over me. Another customer meant a break in the tension. But when I looked up, no one was there. The door had opened slowly, quietly, then eased itself shut. I turned toward booth 7. The man was still sitting there, hands folded, staring at me. "You should lock it," he said calmly. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the door, shut it, and turned the deadbolt. When I looked back, he was standing now for the first time. His posture was perfect, his smile thin and wrong. "You never know who might come in," he said. I backed up a step. "We're closing soon," I lied. "No," he said. "You're not." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the windows, flooding the diner with light. A car pulled into the lot, tires crunching on gravel. My relief was instant. Another customer. But the car didn't park. It just sat there, engine idling, lights fixed on the window. The man in booth 7 tilted his head, eyes on me. "Not everyone who comes here is as polite as I am." He placed another 100 on the table, slid out of the booth, and walked out into the night. The car's light shifted, and it followed him into the darkness. He didn't come back the next night, or the night after. For the first time in weeks, booth 7 sat empty. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt watched. Like he hadn't really left. Like any second, the bell would jingle and he'd be there, sitting straight, hands folded, eyes on me. Frank noticed I was jumpy, asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine, but I wasn't. The silence in the diner pressed on me heavier than it ever had before. Every headlight that swept across the windows made my stomach twist. Every time the door creaked, I expected him. 2 weeks later, on my day off, I came home from grocery shopping and found something on my doorstep. A diner napkin, folded neatly. Inside was a single line, written in sharp, even handwriting. "You looked better in blue." I hadn't worn my blue uniform shirt in over a month. I quit the diner not long after, moved out of town. People think the night shift is dangerous because of drunks or petty crime, but that's not it. The real danger is the quiet ones, the ones who don't shout, who don't draw attention, the ones who sit still, sip their coffee, and study you like you're already theirs. I still check every booth in every restaurant I go to, and if I see someone sitting alone, too straight, too still, I leave. Because some routines aren't just habits, they're traps, and I'm not going to be anyone's routine ever again. If you enjoyed these stories and want more nights like this, don't forget to subscribe to Dark Hours. Hit that bell so you never miss a new upload, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time of night it is right now. I'll be reading them.